in the virtual environments. Now, enhancing productivity in the virtual environments is a very necessary thing because of the present day pandemic situations, also. And a lot of people are jumping on to understand how the virtual environments work and what exactly happens over here and how can one become more productive. We will be joined shortly by one Mr. Christopher Lynn. Hi, Christopher. How are you?
Hey, Nina, how are you? Sorry, it took me a little bit to get in here.
No problem. No problem. Can you hear me all right?
I can. Can you hear me all right?
Uh, I think I will need to put in my earbuds. One moment. I'll just connect my earbuds. One moment. Hello. Can
Yep,
you
can
hear
you
me
hear
all
me?
right? This is far better. This is far better. Maybe
Okay.
I have the fan over here on, and that's the reason why I can't hear you properly.
No worries. We
But
figured it out, right? Two fellow live streamers. We'll solve it.
absolutely, absolutely. So I started the live show because we had to start on time. I knew you would be getting in a couple of minutes. So I was just telling our live audience that working in virtual environments is so necessary. Especially, it has become all the more necessary because of the present day pandemic situations.
Yep.
And more people are jumping on to the virtual working environments, and that this particular episode is therefore a very timely one. And I just want to introduce you to our audience. Christopher is a phenomenal person. I know him, I've met him, and I was so happy when he said yes to coming to a new show, new channel, and this is the real greatness of the person. That they are always supportive for other people. So Christopher is actually an e-learning specialist. He has a very interesting tagline to his LinkedIn profile, and it says demystifying the landscape of learning technology, reimagining learning, talent, and culture at Healthcare. And he is a host of a popular talk show on LinkedIn Live, and it's called Learning Tech Talks. Am I right, Christopher? You wish to add something more to this?
No, I mean that kind of sums it up, I guess, if you want to put it that way. But yeah, my background has always been in learning and learning technology, so have been doing that for my entire career. And I guess the whole demystifying thing is I know a lot of us are being pushed to do that now in learning and development. And for
Right.
a lot of people who aren't super technical, that can feel scary and overwhelming. And it doesn't have to be, which is why I started learning Tech Talks, was to help people understand what technology is, how it works, and how not to be intimidated by it. So no, that's pretty good summary of who I am and what I do.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much. That's really wonderful. Christopher, first and foremost, you and I have been working online for a very long time. Not
Yes.
together. This is our first time when we are together, but you have been working for a very long time, and all my business coaching has also been online for nearly 10 years now. So, see, for me, it was like a situation where I was, traveling a lot, and I was also learning how to become a business coach. So, the easiest thing for me to find clients and actually go and do some productive work was through the virtual environment. And I remember, the first time I sent an email, it was way back in, I think, 1994 or 1995. I was consulting with a company. It was an agricultural company at that time. I mean, I used to consult with those companies also at that time. Now it
Yeah.
seems like such a remote possibility. But the first time I sent an email, I just pressed a button, and there was a client in the US. And within 2 minutes, he called me back. I did not have a mobile phone at that time. Mobile technology was very, very expensive here in India at that
Yep.
time. So I got a call on my uh, land phone within 2 minutes. And I was fascinated with the rapidity of communication, the way I mean, a person sitting halfway across the world
Yep.
could communicate with me, could receive my message within, just a moment and call me back and tell me exactly what he wanted. That was the rapidity, the swiftness of communication, which really fascinated me. To the virtual environments. Later on, when the broadband connection was released here in India, I remember my broadband connection it was pretty expensive at that time, but it was the first ones amongst the top 100, the first 100 ones that was released here in India. So for me, virtual environment is all about faster communication, flexibility, and all of those very obvious things. And that's how I started into working into the virtual environments, and I have really found it absolutely the best.
Yeah.
What attracted you to the virtual environments, and what exactly it has been your journey like? Right now, also, like we are sitting halfway across the world. You're
Right. We're
joining
on
me from
complete other
Greater
sides of the
Milwaukee.
world having a live conversation, talking to each other face to
Absolutely,
face.
absolutely. What?
So what kind of drew me to it? I guess going all the way back,
Hmm.
I thought I was going to be a software engineer, but
Okay.
then I decided I hated coding, but I loved what technology was doing with people, right? What we could
Hmm.
do with people like this.
Right. Hmm.
At the time, this wasn't possible, but right, you could start to see the trends of what was happening. So what really actually drew me to it was two things. One, because I got into education and people development, I was frustrated by the inefficiency of how things had to be done. And it wasn't anybody's fault. It was just the limitations of what was possible, right? So typically, if you needed to train people or educate people, you had to wait until you could get them together. And then, you had them together and then you sent them on their way and you hoped that they learned something and did something with it. And to me, it was ridiculously inefficient. I saw technology as being able to be a way to do it better, right? We can do better things. We can reach people in different ways. We can reach them where they are. Now, compound that with the fact that I'm introverted. So for me, while some people are extremely comfortable with going into big groups of people and going out and, traveling and seeing people all the time for me, that's exhausting. Like it's just too exhausting. So for me, I was looking at it going, well, there has to be a different way because there have to be other people that also think like me who don't necessarily gravitate towards being in person and doing all these things. And to your point about the speed and scalability of technology, we can do things faster and more efficiently than we could before. So I think those two things kind of combined together have continued to have me push the boundaries of what can we do in the digital world that we couldn't do before. And the thing is, every rule that existed and has existed is being broken,
Absolutely.
I mean, almost
Absolutely.
on a daily basis.
Absolutely. A few years back, I was having a conversation with somebody who had just come into my LinkedIn connection list, and he asked me one question after getting into a little bit of conversation about how I work and where I work. I told him I'm having a global clientele and this and that. And he asked me, where are your headquarters? And, at that point in time, the first thought that came to my mind was very kind of a nasty one. I just wanted to retort wherever my head is, but but that was I just stopped myself coming from the Indian background and not retorting like this. So I just politely told him wherever I open my laptop. And this guy, he got very fascinated with it. And he later told me that whenever he had a training seminar, he used to use this with it. That
Okay.
I have a friend and who says this, So, but this is the reality of the situation. Wherever we open our laptops, there our office starts. Whether I'm sitting downstairs or whether I'm sitting in my office area or wherever in my
Yep.
home. And virtual working is the only thing that can actually give this kind of comfort. Now, all of us are kind of logged in because of the present day situations. For us, it's like regular business,
Yeah.
business as usual. Nothing has changed as such, except for the fact that everybody is at home and maybe a little bit of distraction is there. But tell me, Christopher, I still see a lot of people here uh, feeling very hesitant in getting into the virtual environments. What may be the real fears there? Uh, Somehow I made a transition so quickly, I never realized there was any fear. I'm also a very introvert person, but sitting in front of the camera and talking was like something that came very naturally to me.
Yeah.
So, what may be the real fears of? I see perfectly outgoing people who are so happy with the other people, and working in groups, and they are absolutely intimidated when it comes to virtual working environments. What may be the real fears behind this? I have been trying to understand. Please throw some
Yeah.
light on this.
So I think there's two things. Well, there's a couple things, I guess, that I would say I'm seeing. So one is as people leaders, I think there is a little bit of a natural fear around, well, how do I know what my people are doing if I can't see them doing it?
Okay.
And I think that's a legacy management approach that's been fading for a while, but I think is really being challenged right now is people, need to be trusted, and they need to be trusted to be able to do things, and that's what they want. And that's actually where people do their best work, is when they're actually trusted and empowered to do.
True.
But that's
True.
a big shift. If you're not used to doing that, or if you're a people leader who's used to managing by, looking into people's cubicles or walking by their offices, and that makes you feel better about the fact that, okay, they're here, they must be working. Well, when all of a sudden you can't do that anymore, it makes you feel really uncomfortable. And you start to, make assumptions that, well, Nina's not here. I wonder what she's doing. Is she really working? And
Okay.
and right, you start to go a little bit head crazy if you're a people leader, and that's new territory for you. So I think some of it is just this fear and discomfort with, okay, I don't really know how to manage to this. I haven't done this before. And like anything that's new, people are just uncomfortable with it. So if they're used to being in office, they're used to seeing people, suddenly their people aren't there. It's uncomfortable. And I think the other thing that makes it difficult, and then I'll talk about the tech side.
Right.
One of the things that makes it difficult, though, is being virtual requires much more intentionality, right? So going back to kind of the topic of how do you enhance this, you have to be more intentional with just about everything in the virtual environment. So,
Yes.
and that's not to say that things were going well when you were in person. It's just to ensure things are going well, you have to be more intentional. So as an example, right, communication, I think people who are in the office assume communication is good because you're bumping into each other and you're seeing each other and things like that. In reality, there's a good chance your communication isn't as good as you thought, but because you were at least in person, you thought it was. Now in the virtual world, if the only way you talk to your direct reports or your team members is when you bumped into them when you're getting coffee, well, that's not going to happen anymore, right? So the little communication you may have had is now gone. So in terms of making it work, you have to be more intentional, which again is a new behavior. You have to make sure you're scheduling time with people. You have to intentionally, message them on Skype. You have to do things, which a lot of times people didn't put much thought into the things they did. Just going back to like people leaders, they assumed their people were doing their work because they saw them. Well, maybe their people were doing their work or not, but now they have to be more intentional about actually
Right.
seeing, like, well, is work getting done? Before I just assumed it was because you were here, just like I assumed we were communicating because I saw you and said hi. So I think that can feel uncomfortable, and it's a new behaviors to get into in terms of how do you do that. The reality is, I do think technology can feel a little bit scary too, because now you're having to
Yes.
do all this stuff
Yes. Yes.
differently. Again, you used to just walk up to somebody and say hi. Now you're like, well, how do I say hi to Nina? Okay, what tools do I have? How do I make sure that I'm doing that? And so I think there is a bit of a learning curve around, all right, well, what tools do we have? How do I make sure I'm using them to the best of my ability? Because it can feel overwhelming. All of a sudden you're dealing with Teams and Slack and email
Yes.
and all this stuff. And
Yes.
it's like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm actually doing more work than I was before. And actually you probably are. So I think that's
Yes.
where that kind of combination of things makes it difficult for people to make
Yes,
the shift.
Christopher, I feel that we have already been into that mode of where corporates were working like 24 hours in a day, and things were just moving forward for everyone in such a a kind of competitive environment where I don't see any corporate guy who's not working at any point in time during the day, whether they are sitting at home or they are sitting in the office. I'm wondering what has actually changed the whole. It's been just the same exactly. Except for the fact that of course you're locked in inside, and perhaps you'll have to learn to use the technology better.
Yep.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I agree. I don't think a ton has changed really other than, and to some degree, I think this is why we're seeing people so much happier in this new environment, because before they were working all the time anyway. They would drive
hmm,
into the office and they would work all day and then they would drive home and they would be, on their phone or responding to emails and doing things at night. And so if anything, it was almost burning people out more, where now it's like, well, yes, you're kind of on all the time, but at least you can be on wherever you need to be. So to me,
yes,
I agree with you. I don't think a ton has changed necessarily. It feels like
correct.
it's changed because
Yes.
our environment has changed.
Perhaps, yes, exactly. The environment has changed, and by force, I think, by force, people have to be locked down. This word lockdown may be a very, disciplinarian kind of word, which is being used all over the world, and I think that may have had an impact on the psyche of people.
Yes.
See, for most people, when they think of virtual environments, they think of getting a website and getting onto social media.
Yep.
To date, in fact, in the morning I had a conversation with somebody in France, and she may have joined the show live. I'm not too sure, but the way this lady was trying to explain herself, uh, I could see that there was a lot of overwhelming information around her, and she was trying to catch up with everything, with so much of stuff happening on Facebook, and uh, so many people selling so many things that do
Yeah.
this, and people get a lot of traffic and things like that. It can become a little overwhelming at times. So I try to help her with whatever little tech I know. Tell us how to make the virtual working more productive for a new person who may be just getting onto the environment.
Yeah. That's a really good question. And it is, what's funny, Nina, you and I talked about this before, is the fact that sometimes if you've been doing it so long, you kind of forget, what, like, I don't know.
How it
I don't
is.
know what to do
How
different
it's
because I'm
done.
so used to it. But I do
Mhm.
think two of the big things that I've seen and I've actually been spending a lot of time people helping adjust to this, because they're struggling, even though it's very similar to what they've done before. It's right. They're having a hard time. Two things that I've seen really be helpful for people is, one, figure out what your routine is. I think sometimes that's what's so disruptive, is people all of a sudden are working from home, and they used to have a routine before. They woke up,
Right.
they got in the car, they were at
Right.
work, then they drove home, and then right, and so they had a routine, and all of a sudden they're at home or they're virtual, and it's like, I don't know what my routine is. It's different every day, and it can feel a little bit all over the place. And that's where I think, and the one thing I've seen people say, and make sure you get up at the same every time every day and take a shower and get dressed. If that works for you, so be it, right? It's not my thing, right? I wake up, I just throw on, jeans and come work until I go exercise, but I have a routine. I have a
Right.
routine in terms of, okay, this is the way my day flows. This is kind of how things work. And so I think that is a critical component, so that you have some level of normalcy to the virtual world and you don't just feel like you're kind of out in space, kind of doing things whenever. So I think that's important. The other thing though that I think is a big shift for people is, we still kind of hold on to this, our work life, right? This is what work means. And so
Compartment.
yeah,
Yes.
we
This.
compartmentalize
Yes.
it. And so we're
Right.
trying to like make work fit in the virtual world, and it doesn't have to, right? And I think that's a little bit of a mindset shift, but it's also kind of a behavior shift where, for me, I have 5 little kids and I work remotely, and you know what? Sometimes when I'm in between meetings, I'll go just watch, some cartoons with them for a few
Right.
minutes, and that's okay, right? We don't
Yeah.
need to apologize for that or feel like,
Exactly.
"Oh, well, I'm at work, I can't do anything," or, if my kids pop up in the window behind, I have to apologize to everyone or turn my camera off. I think it's that full integration of work and personal life, and like I said, some of it is a mental thing, right? Being comfortable with that. Some of it is just also getting used to not being so rigid in your in your structure that it's, if it's the middle of the day and you're stressed out and you need to go take a walk, get up, go
Why
take a
do
walk,
it by
right?
all
Go
means?
do
Yes,
it. It's fine. It's okay. And so I think it's that balance of structure and flexibility that really helps people make the transition.
absolutely. I also agree with you 100%. So many meetings I see, a lot of people shut down the camera just with the fear of either showing their face or maybe showing their background or whatever. It's all of us are working from home. So it's and right now the entire world is working from home. So
Yeah.
it's like, what's the big deal? It's like whatever it is, you have to make the most of it. So
Well, and that's where as leaders, if you're a people leader, you
hmm,
can help with that by
right.
making that right. Because people instinctively will do it. I did this when I first started remote work
Hmm,
years ago. Like at the beginning of meetings, I would just tell people it's okay. No apologies for interruptions, no
right,
apologies for things like that. We're all just working and it's fine, right?
right.
We don't need to do that. And I think if you don't do that as a people leader, your employees are going to assume that they have to do something. And so if you can kind of release that tension, it helps. I think the other thing I would just add to this, I've seen this burnout with virtual stuff. We used to have natural breaks that we didn't necessarily account for in between meetings because we
Hmm,
would walk to, a conference room where we'd swing by and get coffee and things like
right.
that. And so we got a little bit of a mental kind of release. I don't know
Yes.
about you, but, like, I see it a lot where people are literally back to back to back to back, and there's no gaps in between, and so, people are getting hungry and they're crabby because they haven't eaten and it's 4 in the afternoon, or, they have to run to the restroom and they haven't, had a break in meetings for 4 hours, and I think either one,
Hmm,
make sure you're scheduling that time in between meetings to do that,
yes.
or
Yes.
the other thing I tell my teams all the time is, if you have to go to the bathroom,
Just
go.
just
Just
go.
go.
Yes.
If you were in
Exactly.
the office, I wouldn't,
If you
like,
would
tell you to
exactly.
sit back down if you stood up and tried to walk out. I just say, "Oh, somebody needs to go take care of something." And I think
Yes.
that's, again, it's shift people aren't really used to, and so I think there's 2 ways. One is be intentional, again, about scheduling those breaks. 2 is just be willing to do it, right? Turn your camera off, hit mute, type BRB in the chat, and then come
Just
back when
go.
you're done.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
fine.
Just be yourself rather
Be
than trying
yourself.
to be something else on the camera. I mean, camera doesn't change anything. In fact,
No.
for all I know, a little bit of advertising and filmmaking knowledge that I have, uh, I feel camera is something which can just see right through your soul. It's that's the reason why people are more intimidated, and you can't see the body language at all, except for somebody maybe
Yep.
making some hand movements and things like that. But you don't have to act very perfect in front of the camera.
No.
The moment you try to act very perfect, the problem begins.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you bring that up because I've been using webcams since you looked like a Minecraft character, right? Because webcams did not used to be 4K like this in
No,
HD,
no,
you know,
no.
ambient lighting, all this good stuff.
Right.
But it does make a difference, and I think, one of the reasons people struggle when they go remote is they feel like they're losing the human connection.
Hmm.
Well, it's probably largely because you're not talking to people, face to face anymore. And I think two of the challenges that people struggle with this that, some of it you just have to get over, right? Like I hear people be like, "Oh, I don't like the way I look." It's how you look. Like, I mean, if you don't like the way you look, then I don't know.
To improve, go
Go
ahead,
do something, right?
improve it, do something.
Put down the donut and jump on a treadmill. I don't know what to tell you. This is just the reality of how you
Right.
look. But I think some of it too is going back to that part of just being yourself. People have this impression that if they're on camera, they have to, have a
Act.
suit on or have their
Yeah.
shirt, buttoned up and a tie and oh my gosh, my kid came in the room. I need to quick go off camera. And if you can get over that and say, I mean, right here I am. I woke up a little bit ago. I'm in an Under Armour shirt. That's what it is. It's early morning for me. So,
Yes.
I think that again can help. And what's a funny story is I won't mention what company, but I
Okay.
joined a company that was very not virtual friendly, like not
Okay.
virtual friendly. They weren't used to it. And so I was virtual and I was on camera all the time.
Hmm.
And people freaked out about it, literally freaked out about it. Like they would text me in the meeting to tell me that I was on camera.
Mm.
And of course I said, duh, right? I want you to see who I am. And two things happened that were very interesting, that I think led to some serious change in the organization. It actually kind of went viral. So first was, I'd been doing this for a long time and was the only person who did it. I was the only person that did it. So here's me, and then there's just the black sea of everybody else. But people got used to always knowing Christopher would be on camera. And so at one point I went to an in-person meeting and I had multiple people come up to me and try to give me a hug. And I had no idea who they were. Right. So I'm standing there looking at them and they recognize it, right? They go to give me a hug and I kind of back like, oh, hi, how are you? And it clicked, right? It clicked in their head that they realized, they felt that they knew me. They knew who I was. They just could like walk right up to me and I didn't even blink. And then they realized that I didn't have the same response. And it was because they had seen me and I had never seen them. And so that started to get people to realize, okay, maybe there's something behind this whole webcam thing. So to take it to another level, because people still struggled a bit with it. It was like, I don't know. I don't like the way I look. I have, things in the background. And so for a period of time, I stopped shaving. I would intentionally look as grubby as I could. I mean, literally would go find the grungiest shirt that I could. I let my hair grow out, which I don't have much, but right, it did. And I was all shaggy. And I'd go work out and I'd come up. So I still had like the sweat ring around my neck. And I did it on purpose so that when I would be in meetings and people would say, oh, I'm not really camera ready, it was like, well, right, have you looked at me? And I would kind of almost shame and embarrass people in a fun way. And it worked because then people were like, okay, fine. You're right. You do look like a mess. Like, I guess I can turn my camera on. But then over time, obviously I started shaving again and things like that, but it worked because all of a sudden it became kind of this joke that, well, if you're in a meeting with Christopher, he's going to make you turn your camera on, and it doesn't matter how you look because he's going to look 10 times worse. So I think there's ways you can normalize it a bit and have some fun along the way.
Yes, and so many amazing tools literally available for free these days. I sincerely feel that we are not making the most of the virtual working environments if we don't utilize those. But of late I've seen that a lot of people have jumped onto Zoom and think that that is the ultimate thing. Uh, what do you have to say about this? How is virtual productivity different from productivity in physical spaces? Or is there any difference, or is there no difference? What exactly is your take on this?
That's a really good question. And I guess my response to this, I actually wrote a post about this the other day, which is the assumption that going virtual or digital is simply taking what you were doing today and applying technology to it. It won't work, right? It just won't work. And an example of that, going to the Zoom analogy, right?
Right.
If the way you did meetings before was you all sat around a conference table and you pulled up a PowerPoint and then you just sat and talked through a PowerPoint, it probably wasn't a very good experience before. But if now you're doing that with Zoom, right? Everybody joins and you throw PowerPoint up and you go talk to it for an hour with that. You're not virtual and you're not being very effective in that space. So I guess when I look at how do you go virtual or digital, whether it's in learning, whether it's in business, whether it's, in productivity, any of that stuff, you really have to almost decouple and deconstruct what are the things that are actually working and what about that were we doing. So as an example, you look at in-person stuff, when you ask the question, like, what really made that effective? In many regards, it was the ability to connect and collaborate with other people, right? That really was it. You were able to talk, you were able to problem solve, you were able to solve challenges in that.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, great. But if you think about it in that sense, then you can start to say, okay, if that's the component that made in-person really effective, We can do that in the digital world, but then you have to start thinking about, okay, what are the ways that we do that? So that's where you might say, okay, Zoom might make sense for the discussion portion, right? It makes sense for the discussion portion. Probably not super effective for delivering information to people because they're multitasking if you do that, right? It's not a good medium to do that. So then you might say, okay, then what's a better way to get people information? Okay, well, that might be digital, right? You send it out, you put it in Microsoft Teams, things like that. Project management or collaboration on documents. You might say, okay, well, maybe Zoom's not the right way to do that because to pull everybody together and then pull it up and have somebody typing in edits to a document. I mean, that's just a terrible experience.
Terrible way of
But you
working.
might say, what works really well about it is the feedback and us to be able to iterate on, kind of an idea. All right, well, then maybe Google Docs is the right way to do it because everybody can go in there and collaboratively work on it. And so I think that to me is the whole thing of, if you're just looking for a hammer and if you got a hammer and you're just going to go find a nail and just start hammering everything, it's not going to work. But if you actually look at, okay, what worked really well, then how can technology enable us to do that differently? That's
Exactly.
that's where it actually works to me as effective, or I would actually say more effectively, because we can do it at a speed and scale that we couldn't before.
Exactly. Exactly. So, see, basically, it's all about the way you've been conducting your business and also about what kind of business that you've been in. So that, I mean, you have to mix and match and use the tools as for what they are designed to do the best. And
Yep.
and there's so many tools available. And most of them are available for free these days.
Yeah.
So that's a great thing that so many people keep telling me that I go on Zoom and I do a meeting. I said, "Oh, fantastic, you do a meeting, but what do you do over there?" Zoom is something which is like on everybody's hit list these days.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like Zoom is going to become like the next Google, right? Like that's just going to be the term people use for virtual meeting
For
stuff.
virtual
It's like,
meeting.
oh, hey,
Exactly.
let's do a Zoom, even if you're
Yes.
actually using
You're
Teams
at
or
something else.
WebEx or what. It's we do a Zoom. But yeah, I think, and to be fair, I do agree it can feel overwhelming, right? With the number of tools. You can be like, oh my gosh, we've got Teams and Slack and WhatsApp and Skype, and I think that's where within your teams, you have to kind of figure out what are the tools that really work for us, right? What are the tools that work for us and things like that, and be willing to explore them. And if they don't work, find something else. You don't have to use Zoom just because Zoom is what the trend is right now. If Google Hangouts works for you,
Do it.
great.
Exactly.
Like right, like you don't.
Just be flexible about it.
Right. If you
Yes.
don't have Office 365 and you're more of a G Suite user, great. Like so be it. And I think that's where I predict over the next year, maybe even sooner than that. I think there's going to be a huge push to actually break down what are the capabilities that we need to do. And there's going to be much more translation to, okay, what technology can do that? Because it can be really confusing. And a lot of technologies do a lot of different things. And if you don't really know what you need to do, that's where it can feel overwhelming. Versus if you know, I need to be able to do this, it's much easier to pick a tool to say, can I do this in there? No, I can't. Okay, well, then that's not a tool that I should be using. But until you really know what is that work I need to get done, it can feel, it can feel confusing and overwhelming to look at this vast amount of tools and not really know where to start.
It's not really about tools. It's about what you want to do
Yep.
with those tools. So you have to go in that order and not just purchase the tools unnecessarily, or I mean, even download all of them. It's not really necessary. Just
No.
find and figure out what exactly you wish to do. See, there are some people on the joining us live, so I will just ask them in case they have any particular question. They can just shoot it in the comments section, and we'll bring it up on the screen. And Christopher, meanwhile, I want to just bring your attention to sales people. Most of the salespeople that I am dealing with these days, they're like, we are so used to giving presentation, we are so used to making relationships in
Yeah.
person, making so many calls and this and that. How can we do it? That's now we feel as if we are handicapped. And
Yeah.
I said I've been doing lead generation as well as sales closing all my life, literally all my life.
Yep.
To using the online environment. I mean, I do. So, what exactly do you think can be told to such people, especially the ones who are in sales?
Yeah, so this is I will say this is probably one of the functions that and I have large responsibility for that here at GE Healthcare, right? Sales and marketing is one of my biggest one. And this is one of the I will tell you right now, this is a big shift for them because they are used to it. And we had a very especially in sales, we had a very in-person culture, right? Where it was, we had meetings and we got together and things like that. So that's been a shift. And like you said, a lot of them are feeling stuck. Like, I don't really know what to do. And the reality is, um, in some regards, you've got a bit of a runway ahead of you now because shifting, I think, anything virtual or digital takes time. And I think in some regards that area has not made a lot of the shifts. And so, some of the things we're doing now, one is, we are helping them get better with, hey, how do you start actually connecting with customers like this, right? How do you connect with customers in this sense? Now, that solves the tactical problem, right? The tactical problem of, all right, how do I actually have conversations with them? Now, what was interesting, I ran a little experiment on this, was at first there was this perception that the physicians wouldn't like it as much. They actually preferred to actually see me and do this stuff. What we're finding is it's actually the opposite, right?
Okay.
Because this is more convenient to them, right? Instead of right, it's scheduled for them. They know when it is. They can just do that. Now, that's not to say we won't ever go back to, actually connecting on a personal basis sometimes, but what we're finding is the efficiency is actually beneficial on both parties, right? The sales teams aren't spending as much time driving around, so they have more time to actually see more customers, and the customers are actually appreciating the fact that, hey, we're able to get more done in a short time frame. It's on my schedule, things like that. And with the webcam piece, the relationship building still can happen, and it's a lot easier to actually pull in other people to the conversation than it was before. So, as an example, we had one where there were some really technical things that came up on a sales call. Well, we were able to pull in specialists, right? Because we were able to ping them on Teams and say, hey, this physician has some really specific questions that they need answered. Can you jump on the call and talk through them? So it actually allowed us to do things more efficiently than we could before. So I think some of it is just getting used to that. We're also exploring, some of the products that we're selling are big, expensive products. So we are looking at augmented reality, and actually I've been working with that for several years, so it's not like it's a new thing. But to actually allow the customer to be able to see the product, to be able to interact with the product. But again, that took time, right? So I
Right.
do think some of these organizations that just suddenly found themselves in this environment, they probably don't have AR models or apps with their product lineup there so that they can just quickly switch to that.
Right.
There is some time to do that. I think the other portion that especially in sales is going to be important is, to start building some reputation. It's about using tools like LinkedIn to build a personal brand, to
Absolutely.
build awareness of things and using that to showcase yourself as someone who really knows the space, who understands what's going on with customers. That again takes time, right? You have to build your connections, you have to build that personal brand. And if you haven't been doing that,
Hmm.
there's a roadmap. So I think there's some short-term things that especially in sales that you can do to make the shift, but there's also some kind of longer plays that you have to be
Right.
making to truly be
Right.
really effective in this space.
Yes. So I will just sum up what you said so that our audience understands it better. Uh, Number one thing that was very striking was don't feel hesitant in front of the camera. And one example that comes to my mind is about taking a selfie. I've seen a lot of people pouting and making faces while taking a selfie, they're not hesitant at all at that point in time. But when it
Right.
comes to webcam, I don't know what freezes them. So it's actually maybe a little bit of learning curve is involved. Yes, that's involved with everyone and with everything. But if you look at the business productivity, this virtual working space is far more productive than anything else. And second thing is about focus, dedication, and establishing a routine for yourself. Yes, working from home, working in the virtual environments can be a bit tricky if you don't know how to discipline yourself. See, if we are constantly interested in somebody else disciplining us, then it becomes really difficult. If the boss is watching, people are working, that kind of, or pretending to work, whatever.
Yep.
Or if they're sitting in for like 5 or 8 hours, then they feel productive. By the end of the day, if you ask them what have they done all through the day, what have they accomplished, actually that should be the criteria for productivity, isn't it?
Yep.
And that can be done in any environment if you really wish to do it. So it's really up to us exactly if you wish to be productive or not be productive. And there's so many people who are wasting time sending forwarded messages on WhatsApp. Constant barrage of forwarded messages. I mean, long time back, I floated one WhatsApp message which really came back to me so many times. It was like people were becoming really very cultured over here and very mannered. That every morning they're sending good morning messages, and every night they're sending good night messages.
Yeah.
Whereas if you meet them in person, probably they wouldn't care to wish you so much. So
Yeah.
it's like, and that particular message came back to me so many times. I ultimately deleted it, but then it went into the virtual space.
Yep.
So see, when you can find time to forward those messages, when you can find time to take those selfies, when you can find time to spend so much time on the social media, just you doing the entertaining stuff. I'm not saying it's all bad. It's not a matter of sitting on a judgment on anything. It's a matter of understanding that when there is so much of time available for you to do all that, might as well learn to enhance your knowledge in the about the technology and that what is going to work for you. Look, one more thing that before we wrap up, I want to ask you is focus. How far you think focus is important while working towards making the virtual environments more productive? Because people sometimes tend to lose focus.
Oh,
If there is like a seminar of like 100 people, 1,000 people.
yeah. It's funny because I've done a lot of work with virtual like learning stuff, and that's one of the biggest pushbacks, right? Is people say, "Oh, well, people are multitasking; they're not paying attention." And one of the things that that is a little bit of a tough lesson for people in this space is it's like if people are doing that, they're not finding value in what you're doing, right?
Yes.
Because the
Engaging, it's not
reality
engaging.
and there's a misconception that when they were in person, they were paying attention, right? There's
Hmm.
this assumption that, well, they were paying attention before and now they're not. It's like, maybe not. They might, we've all seen the people that are sitting on their phones through the whole thing in person, or they're sitting on their
Yes.
laptop. It's like they probably weren't paying attention before either. You just assumed they were because they were sitting in front of you. So you're like, well, they obviously, were listening and paying attention. So I think one of the hard lessons when, you realize, okay, nobody's really paying attention is sometimes you might have to look at the fact of, okay, is what I'm doing really adding value to the people that I'm talking
Yes.
to? Because if they're finding more value in,
Their phones.
looking at
Yes.
Facebook in another browser tab, they
Yes.
probably don't see a ton of value in the stuff that I'm doing. And I think that goes back to the whole, this is why you have to look at, well, what is the right time and what are the right things to do in the right environments. I can tell you right now, if you have a Zoom meeting or whatever meeting and it's a discussion, it's a live discussion and working through a problem, most people will not be multitasking as long as there's somebody who actually needs to be part of that discussion. If you do what you did before and you invite Nina, who has nothing to do with the project, but just for awareness, you brought her into the meeting,
Mm.
she's probably going to be multitasking because there really was no point in her being there in the first place. So I think from a focus standpoint, this goes back to what we talked about earlier, which is being more intentional about
Right.
what you're doing and saying, okay, who needs to be here and for what? Right? If we can't answer those questions, then let's not pull people into it. When it comes to, hey, we need people's feedback on things, do we really need to get that live? Probably not. So let's be more intentional about doing that, because maybe I'm just distracted right now because my kids just fell and hit their head. And the reason I'm distracted is there's something more important. Had you let me do that on my own time, I would have put just as much energy into it. But
Right.
just in this moment, I
Yeah.
can't give you my mind share. So I think there's a couple things we can learn from that can help people better focus. Because not that people don't care or people
Mm.
don't want to be engaged. It's just if what you're asking them to be engaged with has nothing to do with them, or in that moment is less of a priority than what they're doing, you can't expect any different results.
Absolutely. So basically, in a nutshell, if you were engaging and providing value earlier, you would continue to provide that, perhaps in a more compressed time frame rather than in an elaborate 8-hour meeting kind of, where
Right.
so it's entirely up to an individual.
Yes.
Anything that you may want to share, which we may have missed out on this about technology or any other aspect, just quickly add on. That would be
I mean, I think this has been a really fun discussion. I'm glad you had me on, and I'm glad we were able to talk this through. I mean, I think the biggest thing for people is you just have to, right, there. I think sometimes especially right now with what's going on,
mm,
a lot of people are comparing themselves to other people, right? Well, they're here, and these people have this figured out. I think it's more about figuring out where you are and just making an intentional step to keep moving forward, right? If you're not completely comfortable in the virtual environment, that's okay. I wasn't at one point either, right? I
right,
mean, we all were,
right,
even those of us who've been doing it for years, there was a point where we did that. It's just we didn't give up. We just kept
right.
kind of saying,
Absolutely.
okay, I'm going to take this step forward. And then once I get comfortable with that, I'm going to take this step forward. And what I can tell you is you'll get to a point where I honestly think you'll get to a point where you'll look back and go, why did I ever not want to be in this space? But
Yes.
you just have to give yourself a little bit of grace and be comfortable saying it's going to be a journey, and that's okay. And don't hesitate to ask for help. Don't hesitate to make mistakes, because you're going
Yes.
to. And you did in person too, right? You did in person too. It's
No,
just,
of course, of
it
course.
was maybe more
Everybody
difficult.
makes it.
So I think
Yes.
those are kind of my parting thoughts.
Absolutely. Wonderful, Christopher. By the way, keep moving forward is the tagline of my company.
I love it.
We just put Success Energy Enterprises, keep moving forward. That's how it is. And
You know
thank you so
what's
much.
funny? I love that tagline. And I think one of the things that sometimes we don't think about is we think, well, we're not moving forward, we're standing still. There is no standing still.
There is no
If you're
standstill.
standing still, you're falling backwards,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So you have to be moving forward. There's only forward and backwards. There is no, standing still. So I
There's
think,
no
keep
standstill.
moving forward
Yes.
is a great message.
Thank you so much. We usually use it as an internal greeting. So today I'll extend that greeting to you also. You're also
There you
part of
go.
our internal team now. So thank you so much for being here, Christopher. And if anybody, I don't think we have any questions
Okay.
as such. So it's thanks a lot for your time. And we'd love to do this a little later. Sometimes I'll reach out to
All
you
right.
again.
Well, thanks for having me. Have a great weekend. I know it's late for you, so enjoy your weekend.
Thank you so much. You too enjoy your evening and you enjoy your day and your weekend. Thank you
Yes.
so much.
I've still got the day in front of me, so I will make the most of the
Yes,
day and night.
yes. And I'll just tell all our live viewers that in case you like our content, please subscribe to the channel on YouTube and follow us on Facebook and other social media channels. Thank you very much, Christopher. Have a very good time.